Thank you all for your patience, giving us a little bit of time to get some information together to give you a briefing. As you are aware, we are here this evening on an officer-involved shooting. This officer-involved shooting occurred at 2601 South Pleasant Valley, an apartment complex just to the south of us here. And it occurred as the result of a 911 call we received just prior to the incident. As you can tell, we are following the COVID-19 precautions as we work through this investigation. That's why you don't see the typical group of people standing here with me that are normally here. But it is important to note that the same investigation that takes place in any of these incidents is taking place tonight. The district attorney is on scene with her staff. The assistant city manager was here on scene, and we have been in contact with the police monitor throughout the investigation. So all of the investigative procedures that take place during these investigations are still taking place, even with the restrictions that we have. This call began at 6:31 p.m. this evening. We received a 911 call stating, the caller stated that they see people in the car in this parking lot doing drugs. They also stated that they could see the male subject holding a gun, and they described the car to the 911 call taker so the responding officers would know the vehicle as they're looking for. At 6:32, we had officers assigned to the call. So within the first minute, we had officers that were assigned to the call. And at 6:33, the caller gives an update that the suspect with the gun is holding it up in the air and described him as a Hispanic male wearing a white shirt. At 6:34, we had a request over the air to dispatch both the police helicopter and K9 to the scene. And also at 6:34, additional info was added to this call based on the descriptions of the vehicle that were provided, that this might be the same vehicle that was involved in an incident involving the Austin Police Department yesterday, where the person in that vehicle evaded in that vehicle. Our officers first arrived on scene at 6:35, and given the nature of the call and the information that was linked to what they believed might have been yesterday, they waited until they had several officers on scene to form an approach with a larger number of officers. At 6:36, it's reported over the radio that they are out on the suspect described in the call, that suspect with the gun. And at 6:40, the officers state that the vehicle is occupied multiple times, 2 times, and they're giving commands to the occupants of the vehicle. At 6:42, they announce that the suspect has gotten out of the vehicle and he is not complying with the officer's commands. And they're talking at this point about using a less lethal strategy, one of our beanbag shotguns, to gain compliance. At 6:43, it's announced over the radio that shots had been fired and that the vehicle was taking off. At 6:44, the officers begin forcing entry into the suspect vehicle. EMS is on scene and staging at 6:46. And at 6:49, we have EMS brought to the suspect. The suspect is transported to the hospital at 6:58, and he was pronounced deceased at 7:26 p.m. at a local hospital. What we know right now, the deceased is believed to be a Hispanic male, 42 years of age. The officers involved in this incident, the officer who fired the initial less lethal firearm, graduated out of the last cadet class, has been on the street for approximately 3 months in his training phase. And the officer who fired the lethal weapon has been with the department for 5 years. This case is under investigation. Again, it is reportedly that based on the description that we have of the vehicle, based on the vehicle that we have here and the people involved, and the officer's knowledge of what's been taking place over the past week, that this incident may be linked to other incidents of burglary, as well as that evading in a vehicle yesterday. That is still under investigation, but that is also why the officers waited to have additional personnel on scene to respond. There are many videos, we believe, of this incident. All of our officers, as you know, wear body-worn cameras. I have had the opportunity to watch one of the body-worn cameras on the laptop and get a visual of what happened, and it describes very closely what I just gave to you with the time points. You can see the officers pull into the parking lot. You can see them get out of their vehicles, and you can see them giving commands to the suspect in this incident. He can be seen standing outside the driver's side of this vehicle. At one point, he appears to have his hands in the air while he's showing his waist. Typically, that would be demonstrating that there is no weapon in the waistband. He is yelling back at the officers various things, and the officers are telling him not to get back in the car and to keep his hands in the air, and telling him to step away from the vehicle. And at one point, they decided to deploy the less lethal because, again, they were not getting the compliance that they were asking for. When the officer fired the less lethal shotgun, the suspect got back in the car, closed the door, and begins to pull out of the parking space, turning right as he's pulling out. And at that point, the officer fired his lethal firearm, fired his rifle, and the vehicle then drives down a short distance and appears to have crashed into a parked vehicle at that time. And again, that's when officers made their approach and was able to make the scene safe, get EMS in there, and transport the suspect to the hospital, where again he was pronounced deceased earlier this evening. There is a lot going on behind me. This will be a lengthy investigation. We will likely obtain a search warrant to search that vehicle, again trying to locate the firearm that was described by the person who called 911, stating that he was holding that firearm in the air. And so that will be one of the things we're looking for as we continue this investigation. Again, this is a multi-pronged investigation. We have the district attorney out here conducting a criminal investigation to determine if these actions were compliant with state law, along with the APD Special Investigations Unit. And then we have the APD Internal Affairs Unit, again with involvement from the Office of Police Oversight, looking at this to make sure it complies with administrative policies. With that, I will open it up for questions, but I will remind you we are very early on, and there's probably more that we don't know at this point than we do know.
Give us a little bit of the mindset of an officer's thinking when the suspect's hands are up in the air and when he backs out, that's when the lethal force is taken there, because he could have been a threat to somebody else. What is the officer's thinking in that moment? Or is that something you're trying to do?
Yeah. I'm not going to try and explain what these officers were thinking. That's obviously the reason we're going to do this investigation. The officers will explain their thought process and their actions taken. I'm sorry. We have no indication at this time whether there was any mental health component to this call. We do know that the initial 911 caller stated that they were doing drugs in the vehicle, but we have no indication of whether there's any mental health issues related to this call.
Are you the only one involved, the suspect that died, or was he with somebody else, other people that you guys maybe are investigating or have in custody?
There was an adult female in the vehicle with the suspect. She was unharmed and is currently detained as we investigate this incident.
How many people total are involved, I guess, with the suspect, or the one who was shot?
What we know of right now is there were 2 people in that vehicle when this incident occurred.
Was he armed?
Again, I mentioned we're working on getting a search warrant so that we can search that vehicle to determine if there's a firearm in that vehicle. The 911 caller described him as standing there with the gun in his hand, so that's something that we're looking for.
Last question.
Do you know the suspect, did he have any other weapons in the vehicle, or just that one weapon?
Again, we are going to get a search warrant to determine if there's weapons in the vehicle. Thank you very much.